The Last of Us 2's no return mode is brutal. It is unforgiving, and it is utterly painful. This roguelike mode challenges you to pick your fan favorite character and fend off enemies in 6 encounters, including a big boss. And it's a lot of fun, but it is also very tough. Dr. Pooplove here, and today I have some tips to help you endure and survive no return. And stick around until the end because I even have some tips to, well, at least increase your chances against invisible enemies. Let's get right into it. Now, my first tip is something you can do before you even get started. And this might actually blow some of your minds. Others of you will probably say, duh, I knew that. But that is, you can actually look at the board and plan the entire run before you even get started. They don't just show you the run that comes next. You can actually see every single run, what enemy type you're expected to face, what the modifiers are, what the mode is. You can even see some other indicators like whether the enemy is going to spawn in knowing where you are or not. And also you can see what rewards you're going to get. You can even see which skill trees you're going to unlock depending on which route you select. So with this in mind, you can identify and try to find the best route that's going to fit your playstyle and your strengths. My next tip for you is another thing that you can do before you even get started, and that is by turning on some of the menu options. One thing that can really help a lot is the awareness indicators, and this is just great because it gives you a little cue on your screen as to where enemies are, especially ones that may be flanking you from behind. This can definitely help you with your situational awareness. My next tip is once you do enter into an encounter is to run around and collect as much as you can before the enemies spawn in. And even beyond collecting items is also allow yourself to get in a really good position. There are many spots on many of the maps that you can use to your advantage. Places I like to go are places where I know they can't come at me from behind. Also, if you are facing off against infected, I like to go to a place that has a higher elevation because even if they know where I am, they have to climb up in order to get to me. And that can allow me to pick them off pretty much one by one. Speaking of infected, I actually recommend that you mostly pick infected encounters. At least for me, I think these are the easiest encounters for the most part to play. The reason for this is that the infected really act much more predictably. Runners just run at you. Clickers respond to the loudness of your sound. Stalkers are a little bit less predictable. They like to hide and come at you. And then of course you have shamblers who explode. But the thing is, none of these infected have a gun to fire back. None of them really coordinate with each other to flank around you. And for that reason, I think they're just a lot easier to take out. If anything else, you can always just run away and get to a safe spot before firing again. It's not the same with human enemies who can fire at you and who often have dogs who can chase you down. So in general, whenever I do see an infected encounter, I pick that one. Another thing I like to do is for the hunted encounters, when I'm against infected, is for the most part, you can just run around the entire time. It's usually best to try to stealth as much as possible at first, but once you do get found out, you can pretty much run and for the most part outrun the infected at all times. The only thing you kind of have to watch out for is stalkers who do try to sneak up on you, and occasionally the runners will be able to scratch at you from behind, but if you zigzag enough, you can pretty much do this entire encounter without taking damage and without really having to do much of anything, except running. Another way to make things really easy when you're playing against the rattlers is to release the clickers that they have chained up. All you need to do is sneak up behind them and press triangle on the cinder block where their chain is attached to, and then sneak away. As soon as the encounter starts, usually that clicker will have some fun and help you out. Now, this tip is not going to be new if you are a fan of The Last of Us, but it really must be said. Bricks and bottles are your best friend. They have this auto lock onto enemies, which allows you to stun them without really even having to aim. And once you do stun them, you can have your way with them. You can also use these as melee items as well. And the best part is they are freely lying around the map. So whenever you see one, pick one up. And if you already have something, make note of other ones you see so you can always return back and grab those. Another tip I have for you is maybe controversial, maybe something not a lot of people people think about, but that is to keep the number of guns you actually are utilizing, keep that gun count low. I usually like to just have one small firearm and one large firearm. And the only exception is really if I have a short or long firearm holster. And part of the reason for that is because you have to manually go into your backpack and swap your gun if you run out, which might not work when you're in some serious combat. But the other reason is ammo drops are pretty random. And so when you have many different guns, your ammo gets spread out amongst them. And it just makes for a lot more gun management while you're taking enemies out. It kind of makes things a little bit more confusing. And I like to just keep it simple with only having really one long and one short gun. My next tip for you is to loot the bodies. So most of the time, especially if you're running low on ammo, whichever enemies you take out, you're able to loot. And pretty consistently, they will have ammo. Don't only go for the ammo crates that are lying around, loot the bodies as well. Another tip for you is you don't need to spend everything every time you go back to your hideout. Sometimes it's better to just save up your parts, save up your supplements, or even your coins in order to wait for that perfect thing to become available. Things like damage on your guns are usually worth holding off and trying to save up for. Also, skill trees that you're trying to get through encounters, it may be better to wait till you get those. And also the coins you receive. If there is that perfect gun you're waiting for, it might be better to see what the store has to offer, spend a little bit on a reroll, and maybe just save up for when it does ultimately appear. You really have to use your best judgment here though. It depends if you have a really hard encounter coming up. It could always be good to put all your resources into things, but if you think you can manage, sometimes it's best to just wait so you have plenty of resources to spend getting exactly what you want. Along those same lines, while the gambits and the dead drops are good things to go for that can give you some nice rewards, they aren't always worth it. Sometimes what the dead drop is asking of you is a bit too much. Like, I don't really enjoy disposing of med kits, and so that may cause me to not want to dispose of it. Also, while you do get some pretty rare rewards with dead drops, it's not always worth it. Like, if I'm good with my current loadout and arsenal, I don't necessarily need to do this dead drop to get something rare because I'm happy with what I currently have. Gambits are good to go for as well because they do give you some rewards like extra coins, but it's not worth it to get yourself killed over them. Instead, go for the ones that pop up that you know that you can handle, and if they're too hard, just don't worry too much about it. My next tip for you is for Assault. Now, one way you can really get a lot of resources in Assault is by taking out all but one enemy. Leave one enemy for a little while. This gives you plenty of time to run around the map and grab as much resources from around the map as you can. Usually there's a nice little awareness indicator that tells you where they are, so all you really need to do is rotate around the map away from them and take your time grabbing resources, collecting things, and that's going to allow you to craft a lot more materials. Another thing you should do is really try to save your resources as much as possible for the final boss. And for the most part, I really think you should save up a lot of your throwables. Molotovs are nice to throw in the middle of an encounter, but when you get to that final boss, you need to be able to unleash everything. That's why I prefer to just hold on to my most powerful resources until I get there, and only really expense them if I'm really in a pinch. Use them as a last resort. This tip is something that you should know if you played The Last of Us Part 2, but if you're using a character that has the ability to dodge, the game can be pretty forgiving with allowing you to use this feature to avoid attacks. Look out for cues from the enemies as they wind up a melee attack, and you'll know that it's time to hit the dodge button. As soon as you successfully dodge, follow up with melee, and you can take out enemies pretty easily this way. Unfortunately, if you're Joel or Tommy, this isn't going to work for you. My next tip is to really take advantage of what the characters are offering and really work to understand what their strengths and weaknesses are. Abby, for instance, she gets health back for melee. It's sort of similar to the brawler perk from Factions. And so if you do have a little damage taken and you would like to heal up, go for melee instead of wasting a health kit. Speaking of health kits, Mel has this very interesting perk where she can craft 2 2 health kits for the same resources as 1. And one thing you may not realize is that because of this, she can actually hold 4 health kits. All you need to do is have 2 health kits and use this ability, and she will now have 4. Ellie also has this Perseverance skill tree, which has this Endure perk, which allows you to avoid lethal damage and instead just puts you at really low health, which can give you a little bit of extra chance to survive. Another thing to note is Manny. Manny is not able to craft health kits, and that is a disadvantage, but that doesn't mean he can't have health kits. That was something I misread and made me not want to use him as much. But he can actually purchase health kits from the store. So make sure if you're using him to grab as much of those as you can. Now, here's some tips to try to face off against those pesky invisible enemies. The first thing that's going to help is if you have a bottle, a brick, a bomb, any sort of throwable, keep that in your hand, because what's going to happen is you're going to see the auto aim for those throwables give you a cue as to where the invisible enemies are. If you can help it, don't waste these by throwing it at them. Instead, try to switch to something else once you know where they are and use that. Trap mines, of course, are also a very good option to use because you can just set it in areas that you want to have covered and it will take some of them out for you. Another advantage is using listen mode. Listen mode actually does tell you exactly where they are. And so I spend a lot of time in listen mode to get their exact presence before I start fighting. If you're ungrounded though, good luck. Also, silhouettes and shadows can kind of help you make out these invisible enemies, as well as if you do happen to get a shot on them, you can see some blood following them. Another thing you can do is tapping dodge a lot if character can dodge. You're not gonna have much luck if you're Joel or Tommy with this, but if you tap dodge quite a bit, it can help you get out of a jam. Shotguns and flamethrowers are also good weapons to have on you because they don't require as much aim. So as long as you have a little bit of an awareness of where they are, you can usually use these. And of course, melee is also going to be one of your primary killing methods here, including shivs if you have them. You can also run around quite a bit and use a lot of these tips to kind of help you get a sense of where the enemies are and then plan how you're going to attack them. But really, the best way to make it through these invisible enemies is going back to my first tip and look at the board, because the board is going to tell you if there's an invisible enemy mod. And so knowing that, you can know which route to not take, because honestly, this mod is pretty ridiculous. But there you have it, some tips that will really help you do much better on your runs. But actually, an additional tip that will really make a huge impact on your ability to play No Return is to collaborate and talk with other people of the community and strategize. That's why you should check out the No Return Discord, created by Factions legend Gumma Flores. They even are doing these custom runs so that players can really sharpen their skills and get even more competitive than the daily run leaderboards. I'll leave their link in the description. And also thank you to my YouTube members who've joined the Bowel Movement. Thank you so much. And if you want to see what my overall thoughts are on this no return mode, you should check this video out. But otherwise, so long, Pooper Troopers.